What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Quick YouTube exclusive for you guys today because the Commanders released their 2025 unofficial depth chart, the first iteration of it, the first version of it ahead of their preseason week 1 matchup with the New England Patriots. So I've had a chance to go over the depth chart, and my first initial impressions is that it's rather boring, but boring is good in the NFL when you have substantial players that have strangleholds on positions, right? There aren't really necessarily any shockers, but we're going to look over the depth chart. We're going to see some things that see if they're holding true with fall in line in camp, and see if there were some actual surprises. Didn't want to bury the lead, but like I said, it's a tad bit boring. Last year it was Jaden Daniels going to be the first quarterback placed on the depth chart. And in years in the past, we've had training camp battles and things of that nature. We haven't had many intense training camp battles reported on, and I didn't necessarily think there were going to be many going into camp. So, getting that validation and that verification of it with the first unofficial depth chart is something that's pleasing to see. So let's scour through the first iteration of the 2025 depth chart for your Washington Commanders. So they say that the players in brackets are currently injured or on active or reserve list. So we're going to go over the offense first. And the first players listed is Terry McLaurin in those brackets. We know he's in those brackets because he's on the PUP, the PUP list as of right now. But they're saying that if Terry McLaurin was healthy and was on the active roster, he would be the first wide receiver in line at the X wide receiver position, with Michael Gallup as the second string, Chris Moore as the third string, and Michael Strachan as the fourth string X wide receivers. Laramie Tunsil starts as the starting left tackle, with Foster Sorrell as the second string, Tyree Phillips as third, and Lucas Niang, who was our recent signing, as fourth string. Brandon Coleman, who's been sitting out the last couple of practices, is starting as our left guard. Chris Paul is second string, with Julian Good-Jones. Tyler Biadasz is our starting center. Michael Dieter as our backup second string center. Sam Cosmi is placed in brackets as well, being that he's on the physically unable to perform list. He would be our right guard as of right now, with our backups being Nick Allegretti and Timothy McKay. Starting right tackles is Andrew Wiley. Second string is our first round pick, 29th overall, Josh Connolly. Third string right tackle, Trent Scott, and fourth string, Bobby Hart. Starting tight ends is Zach Ertz. They actually have two different tight end positions listed. John Bates, I guess that's more of the inline tight end position, as the starter there. With Zach Ertz, I guess that's more of the move type pass catching tight end as the starter there, with Ben Sinnott being Zach Ertz's backup and Kostin Yankov being John Bates' backup, with Cole Turner and Lawrence Cager being third string respectively. Noah Brown was actually the starter opposite of Terry, listed as the starter opposite of Terry McLaurin, with KJ Osborne backing him up. Jacoby Jones and Braylon Sanders and Tay Martin both recently signed. With Deebo Samuel listed, I believe this is what we're going to perceive as the slot position, with Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane as his backups, along with Ja'Cory Brooks. Of course, we know number 5, the golden boy, Jaden Daniels, is your starting quarterback. Marcus Mariota, second string. Josh Johnson, third string, and Sam Hartman. And then Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler. Brian Robinson is your starter. Austin Eckler as second string. Jeremy McNichols is third string. Chris Rodriguez is fourth string. And Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, Casimir Allen, and Demetric Felton all listed as fifth string. And that's actually where I want to start with the offense, because that's honestly probably the biggest surprise. Not necessarily a big surprise to me if you know Dan Quinn and if you know how this coaching staff has breeded competition. But if you've been following the reports coming out of camp, where it doesn't seem like a day can go by without a positive Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, or Bill Merritt as they call him, report, this depth chart will be a little bit surprising, being that, it was reported today that Brian Robinson was back there catching punts. Brian Robinson was back there catching punts, and I did my day 9 of training camp recap where I said it's only a matter of time where Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt is going to be your RB1, based off of how the reports of training camp are going. Not necessarily surprised to see him listed here with as the fifth string running back, though. For plethora of reasons. One is that, right, you don't want to show your hand too early, right? While the beat reporters in Washington have, let everybody in the Washington Commanders community know about, JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt. It's not as if the entire league needs to know about him. That's what these preseason games are for JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt, to put the league on notice. So it's no need to show your hand too early. No need to show your hand too early. And I mentioned in my video this morning that I was adamant, like my biggest offseason move or biggest offseason need was bringing in an RB1, right? But even me, I had to temper my expectations when the only thing that we did addressing the running back position was re-signing a Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez, and drafting a JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt. While I was probably the first one in the base to talk about JCM, to talk about Bill Merritt, because I think that he's that talented of a runner, I had to temper my expectations because how realistic is it that a 7th round pick, somebody that was nearly undrafted, is going to usurp and supersede Brian Robinson on the depth chart early in the season, right? And then training camp happened. And then the reports of JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt showing out every day happened. And then the reports of Brian Robinson catching punts while JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt had a highlight posted by the team yesterday happened. And while I didn't expect JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt to be RB1 listed on the first unofficial depth chart of the season, I'm here to say, like, don't buy this. Don't buy this. JaCorey Crosskey-Merritt is far from 5th string, and it's only a matter of time before he move ahead of these guys in the depth chart. I just think that this is still, Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury sending a message to JCM about not getting complacent, not getting content, and telling him that he's still, while he's showing out, and while he definitely has the coach's attention as well as the fan base, he still needs to work, still needs to be that grinder, because it's only a matter of time before he moves up this depth chart. Other than that, not necessarily any surprises. Noah Brown, despite him missing majority of camp with them ramping him up off of his kidney injury and his knee injuries in the offseason, to see him listed as the starter opposite of Terry shows you that outside of Terry McLaurin, like, this wide receiver room is somewhat talent depleted. I know Deebo Samuels had a big camp, and they list him as the slot role along with Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane, who we've heard about Jalen Lane making plays within like the last 3 or 4 days of camp. He's made a play every day. So expect these things to change. This thing is very fluid. This thing is very transitive. But, couple things that stuck out is that, Terry McLaurin was still listed on the depth chart despite his PUP placement. And that just shows me that the team has every intention of not trading Terry McLaurin and have every intention of him being on this roster as well, along with the prospects of Sam Cosmi being available week 1 are pretty promising, being that the team listed him on here as well. So those guys are 2 shoe-in starters. And then when you look at the depth chart to see Laramie Tunsil, Brandon Coleman, Tyler Biadasz, Sam Cosmi, and Josh Connolly, offensive line, that's very promising. That's very promising, especially when a guy like Jayden Daniels doesn't need a whole lot of time. Whatever time is that you allow him, on top of the little bit that he got at times in last season when he was making chicken salad out of chicken shit, is just a bonus. Moving on to the defense. So we got Deatrich Wise starting at one of the defensive end positions with Clelin Ferrell as his 2nd string. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is 3rd, and Norrell Pollard is 4th. Daron Payne starting as a defensive tackle alongside Javon Kinlaw listed as starters. Eddie Goldman and Jerzon Newton is 2nd string. Sheldon Day, Carl Davis is 3rd, and Ricky Barber and Villami Fahuku. Sorry that I butchered your name, bro, but it is what it is. Your parents should have named you something more simpler. But those are your 4th strings. Doris Armstrong is the starting defensive end, opposite of Deatrich Wise, with Jalen Holmes and Andre Jones listed as his backups, respectively. Von Miller is the starting outside linebacker, with Jacob Martin and TJ Maranga listed as the outside linebackers behind him. Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu all listed as your starting off-ball linebackers. Jordan McGee and Nick Bellore is 2nd string. Cam Madrano and Dom Hampton is 3rd, and Ali Cajo and Cam Arnold is 4th. Marshawn Lattimore and Trey Amos listed as your starting cornerbacks, with Mikey Sanders still listed as your starting nickel. Bobby Price, Jonathan Jones, and Noah I are 2nd string, and Kevon Seymour and Carlin Vigor are 3rd string, respectively. Will Harris is listed as the starting strong safety. Percy Butler is 2nd string. Tyler Owens is 3rd. And Quan Martin, Rich Homie Quan, listed as your starting free safety. Jeremy Reeves is his backup. Ben Nickel and Rob McDaniel. A couple of surprises on the defense. One thing that stuck out to me is that Von Miller was listed as an outside linebacker, even though we were running a lot of 4-3 fronts last year. That was the same designation that Von Miller got. So expect Von Miller to be standing up in a couple of situations this year. Dietrich Wise listed as your starting defensive end, along with Dorance Armstrong, who's just bigger at the defensive end position, along with a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who's a goddamn unit of a man. Adam Peters, one of the things that he was adamant on doing this offseason, and it shows, is getting bigger, faster, stronger along that defensive line. And I believe that we've done that. Even a guy like Jazan Newton, who's has high draft pedigree. He was regarded as the steal of the draft coming out of that first round of the 2024 draft when he wasn't selected, and we ultimately selected him with the second round pick. People were talking about how Washington got great value with that pick, but even him, he's a smaller interior lineman, and he's listed as second string, right? He doesn't have the draft pedigree high enough to, have him supersede or usurp Daron Payne or Javon Kinlaw on the roster if the play isn't matching up. That was somebody that I mentioned in my training camp preview episode that I wanted to hear something about, because I wasn't necessarily the highest on him or as high as others after his rookie year. And he's had a rather quiet training camp. And I always go back to Joe Witt saying that he doesn't like little guys on his defensive line. Like, he said it last year. He said that, he don't like little guys when he was mentioning Sheldon Day, but talking about how Sheldon Day was just a worker and a grinder. And, his philosophy falling in line with Adam Peters when you get fucking Daron Payne, who's built like the Thing, and Javon Kinlaw, who makes him look small, who's built like fucking Thanos on the defensive line. I'm not surprised that those guys are listed as your starting defensive tackle pairing. Dorance Armstrong, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louva in their second year. Trey Amos, rookie second round pick. Trey Amos, already listed as a starter, matching up with everything that we've heard coming out of training camp, everything that I saw with my two eyes when I was boots on the ground at training camp. Opposite of Marshon Lattimore, I made my bold claim last week after I left training camp where I got my eyes on these guys, pause, and I said that Trey Amos, Marshon Lattimore, and Mikey Sanderson will make up a top 5 cornerback group in 2025, and Trey Amos ain't did nothing but made plays since I left Ashburn. He even had a pick on Jaden Daniels today. Trey Amos is probably the guy I'm most excited to see in these New England Patriots scrimmages come Wednesday, and then ultimately in the game come Friday. One of the surprises for me on the defensive side of the ball is that not necessarily that Will Harris is the starter, but Pussy Butler is listed ahead of Tyler Owens. That doesn't match anything coming out of training camp. Tyler Owens is a guy that's flashed every day, and I'm not just saying that because 3 months ago I told you that Tyler Owens was going to be unlocked by his coaching staff. But if you followed any reports, I know Percy Butler got that extension, but Tyler Owens has flashed damn near every day. So you see him third on the depth chart. I don't know if that's a deferent signing because Percy got that extension and he's been here a year longer. But I think Tyler Owens is going to be a guy that, while he might never be listed as first on the depth chart, he's going to get a lot of playing time. Same with Kane Madrano. Ben Standing and John Kine have talked about how he's flashed and he's outplayed Dom Hampton. So I think just a guy like Nick Bellore being placed ahead of him on the depth chart is due to like Nick Bellore's special team prowess and, just his personality and him having everything that a commander stands for, right? And just same thing with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, as I mentioned, on the offensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. just preaching competition and not wanting these guys to get content and to work their way up the depth chart. Quan Martin, pretty much a shoe in to start at free safety. And yeah, I don't think I need to talk much about that there. Don't need to talk much about the special teams either. I'm a little surprised to see KJ Osborne listed above Jalen Lane. Y'all know that's probably was Jalen Lane's biggest skill when he was drafted. He was probably the best punt returner in the entire draft in the country in college football last year. And this just shows me that KJ Osborne might have, a leg up for that wide receiver 6 battling for that, 53rd, 52nd spot on the back end of the roster. He might have a leg up because of his special team prowess with him listed as the first team punt returner. And then Deebo Samuel wasn't listed as kick returner at all. That's something that I think that they're trying to hot. So I might be talking a little bit too much. But Deebo Samuel was listed, has been back there with Austin Ekeler on kick return when I was down there in Ashburn, and I think that he'll ultimately be your starter. So, they playing mind games, playing a couple of tricks. Trustway, pretty much a shoe-in. Matt Gay's been damn near automatic during camp, and then Tyler Ott as your long snapper, at the kick returner position. Teams have film on Austin Ekeler and Luke McCaffrey, and they have film on Deebo Samuel as a kick returner with the 49ers, but not as a Commander. And I think they try and keep that under wraps because I think coming September 8th, week 1 against the Giants, Austin Ekeler and Deebo Samuel is your start and kick return pairing. So that's my instant reaction to the first unofficial depth chart of the 2025 season for your Washington Commanders. What do you guys think? Give me your reaction. Are there any surprises? Are there any guys that are listed above some guys that you didn't necessarily think they would be listed over there? Are there guys that are buried on the depth chart that you thought had a better chance or a more promising chance of making it out of training camp? Give me your reaction. As always, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, turn your notifications on so you're not missing any of this content because, we get you the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders. I got my 17 shirt on because we standing with Terry McLaurin until he signed a contract, and I'll check in on y'all on the flip side. Peace.